Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our morning coffee time for, what is it? Monday, July the 6th. So, I didn't have time to extract beautiful images of clouds for the countdown this morning. So I thought we'd just replay and refresh our minds about the beautiful Jhana talk that Ajahn released yesterday. So I hope everyone had a chance to catch that. I did not. I had quite a busy day with all the pujas and the streaming and the morning coffee, and I visited the Mid-Columbia Unitarian Universalist congregation in their celebration yesterday online. I usually get to visit them once a year. They meet in Hood River, but like many other spiritual communities now, they're meeting on Zoom and in various digital gathering halls. So that was nice. And then we had a couple very old and good friends offering the meal yesterday. Scott and Joan Benj were up here from Bend, so it was really nice to have them here for the meal offering and have a chance to visit with them out in the sun, outside on the deck. And our good friends Michael and Mimi from Mosier, who hosted myself and Ajahn Sudanto in the summer of 2007 on their land over in Rowena. So, which is just across the river on the Oregon side. If I climb up the hill, I can see there. So it's nice to have them visiting. By the time I got free, it was 1 or just after 1, and the irrigation system was calling. So I didn't get to listen to Ajahn's Jhana talk until this morning. So, which is good. It's nice to wait till you're fresh. So let's see, who's all here this morning? 80 people, okay. 3 minutes after the hour, but I think everybody who wants to be here is here by now. So today on the Buddhist calendar is the entering of the Vasa season. So myself, Ajahn Sudanto, and Venerable Rikito be doing a little ceremony this morning, a little bit later, to determine our residence here. Make a commitment. I'm big on commitments and the value of commitment. So we are going to be committed to being here and nowhere else, unless a very significant emergency arises. So if you think about it, commitment to place, it is a form of relinquishment, non-distraction, and has a great potential to quell restlessness. So just a thought. So, and I've heard from different people who are connecting with being at home and a little less movement and activity. Although I'm also seeing signs that people are ready to go back to restlessness. Some people. So So listening to Ajahn Sona's talk this morning, I appreciate the tone, the pacing and the tone, and how he's kind of walking us through these very helpful images, similes, analogies, call them what you want, to help us overcome the maybe the distance or the abstractness that one might feel in trying to get a sense for what is this conscious experience that we're moving towards as we make efforts to develop the mind of serenity and lucidity. And sometimes, maybe all too often, people get bogged down in technical definitions, and some of that can just be fueled by a weakness in our ability just to trust ourselves, trust our experience. We long for certainty and confirmation from others. And I'd say in these realms and in matters of the heart, sometimes we can't necessarily find that certainty. It's very difficult to know the mind of another. And it's very difficult to know even many aspects of our own mind. So, but the Buddha gives us enough information, I think, that we can recognize the kind of scenery and the terrain, the signposts, and these similes of what it feels like, to be in the presence of the serenity of the jhanas, the experience of, let's call it, a more perfect form of samadhi. Because samadhi is this wholeness of mind, this stability of mind, the undivided experience of consciousness and attention. And, you can make a case that it's a spectrum. So, we can experience that in very discrete, fleeting kind of moments, and doesn't necessarily take on the kind of feeling, tone, or the characteristic of being released from illness or suddenly freed from debt, or getting confirmation after making a choice at the crossroads in a difficult and dangerous place. You're not just at the crossroads and making some sort of neutral, arbitrary choice. You're making one that could be life or death, could be safety or danger. And you make the choice. And then all of a sudden you get confirmation, okay, this is the way. That feeling of relief, having passed through doubt. And I like the fact that Ajahn has a bit of a sense of humor. He's kind of chuckling and laughing the whole time he's talking about this predicament that most of us are living with and underneath. Like, we mostly don't have much of a profound sort of experience of these forms of relief from the oppressiveness of the hindrances. We're living with dis-ease and illness. There's illness in our heart. Ill will, frustration, agitation, a sense that everything's all wrong. Other people are wrong, I'm wrong, the world's wrong. We have that sense of slavery that comes with debt. And Ajahn used a kind of a non-standard way of rolling these out. Like typically you deal with the hindrances in terms of like talking about sensuality, then anger, and then dullness, restlessness, and doubt. So, but he starts off with free from illness, which is the simile for overcoming anger and the emotional burden of anger, frustration, hostility, and a will. Freedom from debt, which is one of the ways the Buddha describes the predicament of having this wrong-headed strategy of finding happiness and completion in the sense realm. So, and that is the predicament if we don't do the hard work of finding better and alternate forms of happiness and well-being. Sensual happiness always leaves us kind of wanting and lacking for more because of the time signature of how quickly it fades, and we need something else. I was very happy to hear that Ajahn used the word completeness, because this is like one of my favorite ways of reflecting on the predicament. Like any sense that life is missing something, that there's a lack, that somehow the present moment isn't full and complete, is the symptom, the feeling tone, the symptom that we should be mindful and on the watch for. Even right now, as we're sitting here in front of our iPads and phones and computers, is there any sense of lack? Is anything missing? It's like we can in many ways not just notice that, but incline the heart to be constantly kind of correcting for the kind of growth and development of that sense of discontent, the sense of lack, and move instead back to the present moment and a profound sort of sense of the present being good enough, full, fine, complete. It's like this. So, in that sense of it being perfect as it is, complete, without lack, often I find the way to nurture that is in nurturing a kind of connection to just this very experience of body and mind, and being able to relax the anxious habits of thirsting and of being itself, like trying to be somebody, going somewhere, trying to get something or get rid of something. So relaxing the habits of selfing. And it's not about getting something out there, it's about dissolving that delusory sort of sense and inclining the heart, like dissolving the hindrances and resolving this ever-present opportunity for a sense of connection and completeness that we find in its most perfect form in the experience of serenity. Serenity informed by a deep and true understanding of the Dhamma. So maybe just last comment, sort of. I often talk about the work of mapping the Dhamma to the terrain of our real world experience or our felt experience. And towards the end of the talk, Ajahn talks about this around the time he's talking about the quadratic equation. Like, what is that? It sort of means nothing to me. And how is that sense of abstraction and confusion sort of eliminated? It's like, well, maybe a skillful math teacher walks you through what it is that you can relate to and you do understand, to get to a place that you have some sort of connection to it, and it's imaging something like in your known experience. And so the stories and the imagery and the similes of the suttas do quite well to help that, but also, having friends in Dhamma and listening to Dhamma talks and talking about these things also. And trying to talk about your own practice and your own experience can be very helpful. And articulating what's going on. So it's like we need story, we need narrative sometimes to, I don't know, it's to really solidify knowledge and wisdom. So that's a few of my thoughts about Ajahn talk last night. Very much enjoyed it and appreciate all the hard work from everyone at Birkin, making such a beautiful sounding and beautiful visual contemplation to accompany the teachings. So, what did you all think? I hope everyone had a chance to watch it here. Let me scroll through the chat here and see if people have comments or questions. So I kind of answered this one in the chat already, but let's see. For the benefit of the stream. Whoops. Ajahn Sona emphasized freeing oneself from the five hindrances, hence to enter jhana. In practice, is there a distance one travels internally, depending on how dug in one is? And I put this in the chat, but it kind of depends on your skill. But one certainly can image it as a distance, like based on the strength of the heart, and to a certain extent, like how fit the mind is, but also how it is that how well it is that we understand the mind and we understand the terrain of moving from the world of the five hindrances to the lucidity and serenity of the jhanic state. It can feel like a journey, and you can't necessarily just go from here to there. So, but it's non-linear. This is not like a physical distance. This is this is a matter of the heart. And I've had many surprising experiences where I felt really stuck and distant from such a state, and then pleasantly surprised at how fast sometimes things fall away. So, and whether you're near or far, it's not something to trouble yourself over. Just get moving. Put one foot in front of the other, and move forward. What else are you going to do? Go backwards? Stand still? But it is good to know that, like, it's not merely through wishing. That's one of the other images that Ajahn Sona brings up. Just lay the causes and conditions, do the work, engage in the cultivation, and there's no need to wish. It's like when the conditions are full and ripe, they automatically flow on to the fruit of that development. So let's see, what else do we have here? Eleanor, I see your question here, but I'm going to skip over that so we can just stick on the theme of Ajahn's talk in the jhanas. So, but you're welcome to maybe ask that another day if we don't get around to it. Okay. Bear with me here. It's hard to sort through these. I have two chat windows open. One shows me the highlights of people that mentioned Pacific Hermitage, which helps me ferret out the questions a little bit, but I have to then. Here we go. Okay. Good morning, Scott. Is it true that not all first jhana will be felt the same? It can be weak and last longer, or be intense, rapture, and maybe felt for a shorter time. Yeah, it's definitely not all the same. And I would say, even intensity aside, like, each experience is never quite the same. The mind is such a incredibly refined experience with so many nuances. It never feels the same. It might feel familiar, like, returning to your favorite spot on the beach and watching the sunset. Is it the same? Like, even if you went on the same day at the same time next year and the weather was the same, would the experience be the same? I don't think so. So, yeah, this can be a place where doubt can arise. Like, one wonders how weak or strong the various jhana factors need to be felt. And in particular, like, I remember feeling a lot of doubt early on about the experience of Pīti-Sukha, which can be very variable. And it was helpful to get the advice of other more experienced teachers saying, the rapture doesn't necessarily need to be earth shaking. It can come in very varying kind of forms, sometimes very subtle. And one can pass through those experiences. I mean, one can fall away from it, but also one can kind of pass through that, because those things have a role or a function to play in a progression. If you think of it as a progression to a deeper state of of jhana, or deeper state of serenity. So, and rapture ends up becoming a hindrance itself to something even more sublime. So, Pīti-Sukha feels like sensual pleasure. How is this different from the hindrance of sensual desire? Well, Pīti-Sukha, I mean, you can say it is sensual pleasure. I mean, we're talking about the rupa jhanas here. So, like, these are bodily based experiences. And the senses are in play and engaged in this. But, as the mind sort of moves through the path of deepening sort of samadhi, you move to, I would say, more of a mind-based, pure, non-sensual experience. But even the fourth jhana is still rupa. It's still based on form. So they call these the formless jhanas. So how is it different than sensual desire? Well, it can be, I mean, this whole thing happens through a cultivation of conditions. So there needs not to be desire or longing when the conditions have been developed. The mind just moves in this way. And the less self there is, and the less craving or desire there is, the more effectively it just moves into this experience of joy and happiness, or Pīti-Sukha. So desire can sometimes come up and interrupt that sort of process. And destabilize it. But there is a great similarity in it. It does take some experience to maybe disentangle. And, this was a great conundrum for me early on. Pīti-Sukha feels so much like the best of sensual delight. But it has a different aim, and it's moving to a different place, and it's based on something very different. So, like, Ajahn talk, he referenced this one teaching where the Buddha was talking with somebody who was a musician and was wondering if the pleasure of that is the same. And he says, it's the same, but it's different because it's miccha samadhi. And, one of the things that makes it miccha is, it's based on something that isn't as stable and secure as meditative skill, or even like turning towards the meditative object. So it's like, the breath is always here. And if you've developed the skill in developing the pleasure of samadhi based on what's essentially a very neutral kind of object that's always with you, it's not as dependent or conditioned in some sense as pleasure based on a piece of music that thrills you. But also, it's the reason you're doing it, the aims and purposes are very different. So, we're developing this mind, and we're developing these jhana kind of factors to overcome the hindrances and to move past the coloration, the static, the confusion, the lack of clarity that they breed in the mind, so that we can move to a state of clarity and lucidity and understand the Dhamma for the purpose of overcoming dukkha. So, and that's part of what makes it samma, is the its connection to the path. So, it's like it has a different trajectory, if you will. Good morning, Kent. Ajahn talk reminded me of the book Man's Search for Meaning. Some Auschwitz inmates were able to retreat from their terrible surroundings to a life of inner riches and spiritual freedoms. Yeah. Is that Viktor Frankl? Right. Yeah, such stories exist. His is one of them. And it's a testament to what is possible. So, good point. So true. And my favorite quote from that book is, "In the space between stimulus and response is freedom." Good morning, Sumana. Your recent Adhiṭṭhāna. Oh, so this must be how far behind I am. I was talking about commitment, our Adhiṭṭhāna. And yours is to touch in or live with teachers and Sangha daily. Incredibly supportive. I agree. That's my commitment too, which is why I'm a monk. Zola. Good morning. Ajahn Sona spoke about wrong samadhi. So that's Miccha Samadhi in Pali. In his music example, recently a friend described a samadhi-like feeling through psychedelic drug. May you comment on right versus wrong samadhi? Yeah, well, I already did. Yeah, samadhi in service of the path, and people do have samadhi-like experiences, and following Ajahn example, you could sort of say they are samadhi, or maybe they're samadhi. Depends what their experience is. But where they differ is, and this is a point I've made in conversations with people about the role that psychedelics might play. One can have very kind of profound experiences that are even transformative, but um, one doesn't need to go to that, take on that danger, because it is a risky endeavor on some level. But the thing I think about most there is no path there. So even if one does have a spiritual experience or a transformative experience or a very insightful experience, there's no path. So one can be transformed in some way, but there's not really like a clear way forward. And merely doing more drugs is not a path, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's my take on that. The mystery of causes and conditions. I value the instruction to inquire when serenity arises. How did that happen? Do you have any suggestions for such inquiry? Yeah, that's a very useful question to ask. Like I remember years ago listening to a talk from Ayya Khema, and she made this point very strongly, like, in developing and building a meditative habit, meditative practice, one should be almost like a scientist, and you have a theory of how to practice and a strategy that you're pursuing, and you kind of jump in and run the experiment, and then constantly be reviewing how well did that work. And it is good to do this. It has to be kind of, I guess, done at the right time, or maybe, or even balanced in some sort of way. But reviewing, and even there is even a role, like in the midst, if the mind is really going to move to complete stillness, where discursive thought kind of falls away, just let it go. But there's a time where it comes back from that, or there's a time where it's not really settling anymore, and it's good for this thought to arise, and but not to get lost in it. So like, it's just I sort of say to myself, just ask the question, and I do this around suffering as well. Like when I find myself suffering, it's like, how did I get here? And it's like asking the question and entering this kind of contemplative space so that answers may arise in the mind, or um, at least some sort of hypothesis. So, and sometimes it's opaque to us, and if it is, that's fine. Um, and I think you can apply the same to the experience of serenity. It's great to um, reflect on, contemplate, ask the question, see what it is that you can kind of notice. And sometimes there's very even sort of trivial or mundane things that one might have done differently that help support that. Things that you read, you listened to, things that you did, time of day, the quality of effort, like how strong or balanced or weak or easeful the effort was. So, good morning, Phil. I found the talk inspiring, but I need to be careful not to overthink it. I have a tendency to do that when learning new things. Yeah. Well, I made this comment last week. Go back and listen to it again. Rather than overthink it, just listen to it again. So you can easily pick that up as a talk that you listen to once or twice again this week, just as a theme to kind of keep reminding oneself. I lost track of time. I guess we're a little bit over today. I liked Ajahn explanation of insight of Vitakka and Vicāra and found that really helpful. I think I must have missed that part of the talk. Vitakka Vicāra. Ayya Khema, my first teacher in Berlin. Oh, lucky you. Oh. Yeah, I found some of her teaching, her books, and some of her talks really inspiring and helpful when I was first ordained. Okay, last question here, and then I'm going to move on with the day. If one sees the Buddha while reciting the name, should one ask if this is real? Uh, I wouldn't think so. Depends what you mean by sees and real. So, like in the Pali Canon, the Buddha says, after his parinibbana, neither gods nor men will see him or can see him. So I'm a bit skeptical about people's experience. I'm not skeptical that people think they can see the Buddha, but if one takes the Buddha's sort of statement, and there's many others that support it in the Pali Canon, to heart, the way we can see the Buddha now is to see the Dhamma and to develop this practice and have the very same experience of selflessness and freedom from suffering. If you see that and you see the truth that liberates one from that, then you see the Buddha. You have some image in your mind or an apparition that appears in your meditation, that's not the Buddha. So, all right, well, we'll give Adil the last word. He who sees the Dhamma sees me. So may it be so. May we have that sight before this life ends. So, all right, friends, I'm going to leave it at that. Have a good day. Let me know if you see the Buddha. And we'll be back here tomorrow morning for our morning coffee session. So be well and see you tomorrow.